All right, so we're going to start by talking about the data frames now. I ended up stepping out of the last session as Stefik was wrapping up towards the end. I don't think that he's touched on any of this yet. If I do start talking about stuff that Stefik already started, then just holler at me and let me know. But to start with, anyone who'd like to follow along, if you haven't been doing so already, all of the stuff that we're working off of is off of the Quorum website, and you can access it all from the EPIQ schedule. The EPIQ schedule itself you can find from going onto the website, and you can find it under the EPIQ section. If anyone needs any help finding that, feel free to say so. But for right now, we're going to start by actually looking at some data frames. And to do that, we're going to start by looking at the data frame reference page. And we're going to have here a very simple program. It's 4 lines of code plus some comments in it. And so we've already talked a little bit about the data frames. They've come up as part of the opening discussion Stefik shared with us when we were getting started in our sessions yesterday. And basically what we've seen is that if you can take something like a CSV file or a comma separated value file, you can grab something out of something like Excel or through other table applications. We can get some data and we can do stuff with it. We've already seen the tables. Now it's time to actually do said stuff. And in order to start with that, I want to start by just looking at this piece of code. We're going to end up using Quorum Studio a little bit later in the session, but for right now, I'm just doing it on the website. And so, ignoring the comments for a moment, even though the comments have helpful information in them, we have 4 lines of code. Use libraries.compute.statistics.dataframe, DataFrame, frame::load, and then the name of a file, and then output frame::toText. So I am going to ask for audience participation during this because that helps me understand that that my mic is on and that people can hear me, for one, but also just to make sure that concepts are coming through and whatnot. So at a really high level, what do we expect these 4 lines of code to do?
To go to the library.
Mm-hmm.
And output it in some type of frame.
Yep. So we're going to load up this library. We're going to get a frame. We're going to load some stuff into it, and then we're going to output the text. Now to hit it line by line, we're going to get to this use libraries.compute that line of code. But before I do, the second line of code, DataFrame. What does that line of code actually do? We have a sense of the high level of what this program is trying to do, but what does this line in particular, DataFrame, what does that actually do?
Name it?
Names it. Yeah, so that's true. We are giving it a name here. We can see that if I change this name, so instead of calling it frame, I could call it frame1, right? If I try and build this program now, it's going to throw an error because on line 10, this third line of code, frame::load, I specifically say frame, but that's not the name of it anymore. It's now frame1. So I am giving it a name. That name does matter. We need to make sure that name matches up. More broadly, what this line of code is doing is it is making a variable. So in the previous session, Stefik showed some examples of stuff like I can say integer thingy, doesn't matter what the name is, I give it some name, but integer thingy equals 5. That makes a variable that has an integer type, and I can store 5 into it, or any other of the many, many integers that we can fit inside the 32 bits of our computer to store an integer value. In this case, I end up using this equal sign in a value. I don't do that for the data frame. Why is that? Why don't I have to use an equals and do anything else?
Because you add to it later?
Yeah, pretty much. So it sounds like some kind of trick question, but the reality is basically that when I have an integer, the integer could be anything between some really large value to some really, really negative large value. The compiler won't give any assumptions as to what it's going to be. But for the data frame, it kind of knows what a data frame is supposed to be, at least at base level, and says, if you give me a name, I'm just going to make one for you. And then if you want to do extra stuff, you're going to have to do that yourself later, because that sort of stuff is more complicated than you can just slap onto the tail end of an equal sign. So in this case, we say data frame, we give it a name, and then on this third line of code, we start doing stuff with it. But the compiler doesn't know what you're going to want to do with it until you go do it yourself. The other values like the integers, the numbers, the Booleans, those things require that you put in equals and you give it some kind of starting value. But for this is not what is called a primitive object. The integers, the Booleans, the numbers, and text values are considered primitives. Those you have to give some kind of starting value with an equals. What type is a data frame? If it's not primitive, what are the other kinds of things that we can have in Quorum? For those who have come to previous years and have a little bit of background.
Object.
That's right. There are basically two types of things. There are primitives and there are objects. Primitives are the really basic, simple things. They are the foundational building blocks that pretty much every program ever is going to end up using. Integers, numbers, text, or Booleans, true or false, right? Objects are the more complicated types of objects, such as data frames, where they can just do more elaborate stuff. So now I want to come back to that very first line of code. Use libraries.compute.statistics.dataframe. Somebody already mentioned that we are loading in the library, and that's totally true. Why are we doing this? Why is it necessary? Why do we have to do this in the programming language?
It's pretty advanced program, so I mean that kind of does it for us, doesn't it?
Right. So, like you're saying, the data frame is a pretty advanced sort of thing. We have here these 4 lines of code, but someone else has already written a bunch of code that goes and it lives in a different file that lives somewhere else that has some code describing what the data frame is to the language. And so when we say use libraries.compute.statistics.dataframe, it finds that file that lives somewhere else, and it basically brings in the content secretly. We don't look at the code, but it lives somewhere the compiler can find it, and it brings it in to use it in our stuff. But why do we need that for the data frame and not something like the integer? Stefik did have to go write code for how stuff like integers and numbers and that stuff works too, and that's part of the compiler. But we don't have to tell the language, please give me integers and numbers and etc. But we do have to ask about it for the data frame. So this is sort of an abstract question, but why is that? Why do we need to do that?
This is more advanced and more in depth.
This is more advanced. It is more in depth. It's fairly niche in the grand scheme of things. I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to go to the front page of the Quorum website. This is a little bit outside of the tutorial, so I'm going to show this and I'm going to describe it. It's not necessarily something that you need to be following along here. Oh, geez. Zoom is very helpfully putting a thing right on top of where I'm trying to click to get to something on the top bar here. That's cool. So that's okay. I know where it's located. It's at the reference page. The top bar has something for the reference page. We also have a series of libraries that I can reach if I can remember how to get there without using the top bar. Well, that's all right. The important thing is that if I go and I look at the data frame, someone asked yesterday, is there a list of all of the commands that I can use in Quorum? And the answer is yes, there is. And also it's a ton of stuff. If you wanted just all of the commands that are available in the data frame, this is the data frame documentation, and it has.
Andy literally showed us this exact same thing.
Cool, perfect. It has a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why we have this use libraries dot blah 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 is because all of this stuff lives in that file somewhere. And also, you're not going to need this if you're doing something like building a game, or if you are working on a screen reader, or if you are doing any number of other things that you might use programming for, unlike the primitive types, which you're probably going to use for basically everything. So that's why we have this use libraries.compute.statistics.dataframe. I'm trying to do something specific. I don't necessarily want it for all programs, but I do want it for this one. Please go get a file, bring it back, and let me use it. So We have our use statement, bring in the file. We make our data frame object, and then we have frame : load quotation data / height of male and female by country 2022.csv, right quote, right paren. I think we've already mentioned in the abstract what this line of code is doing. It loads that file. This particular file lives at data / height of male and female by country 2022.csv. In this case, that reflects somewhere on our website. On our website, the website is basically a computer just like anything else that would be running our code. If you run this on your desktop, you'll have your project that lives somewhere and it'll look for files relative to the project. When you're doing this, it's just looking for a folder somewhere on the computer where our website lives. And in that computer where the website lives, there is a folder called data that contains this stuff, and it loads it in. And then finally, output frame to text. If we run this, we'll see that when it does this output, this is the only line of code that actually outputs anything into this bottom area. All the rest of this was just set up. And we can see what the contents of the file were. Rank, country name, male height in centimeters, female height in centimeters, male height in feet, female height in feet, and then a bunch of rows underneath it with a bunch of different values. So that is, in its most basic form, what we're going to be doing with data frames. We ask the language, please let us use it. We're going to make one. We'll be loading in some data, and then we'll be doing something with it. That something is going to be a lot of what we're spending our time on over the course of EPIQ. Right now, we're just outputting it out, but there's a lot of more interesting things we can do as well. So are there any questions regarding this? Can't find the file on my computer. So are you doing this on Quorum Studio right now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that's a good question. Let's get into actually doing this in Quorum Studio. Right now I'm doing this on the website, which already has this folder and this file here. If I want to do it on Quorum Studio, it's not on my machine yet though yet.
Okay.
So to fix that, let's go ahead and let's go through the process of doing this on our own computers. So I have here Quorum Studio. I don't have any project open yet, but I'm going to make a brand new one. And I will get to your question in a very long and circuitous way, Derek. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm going to make a new project. I'm just going to make it a blank project. I don't really want a whole bunch of stuff in here. I'm going to give it some name. I'm going to call this my charts project, or actually not my chart, sorry, my data frame project. I'm going to click OK. And now if I open this up, my project contains a single folder called source code. It has a single file, main.quorum, and main.quorum is completely blank right now. And I would like to just do the same stuff I was just doing on the website. I want to do it here in Quorum Studio. I'm going to need the code that I had before. So I'm just going to write it out here real quick. So I know that I need a use statement in order to actually use the contents. That is libraries.compute.statistics.dataframe. I need to actually make a data frame object. So data frame, call it frame. Frame : load. I'm going to put parentheses. I'm going to put 2 quotation marks. I'm going to leave the inside empty right now, and I'm coming back to that one. And then once it's all done, I'm going to output frame : to text. And before I go and I actually get the file, does it make sense how I'm accessing the special code inside of this using this, the name of the object, and then the colon, and then some commands telling it, please do something off of this object? Are there any questions about that? Okay, so as Derek has rightly pointed out, if I go and I'm going to copy paste this value here, data / height of male and female by country 2022.csv. If I paste this in, if I click build, what will it do?
You'll get errors.
Well, if I click build, it actually builds successful. There's no error when I build it because the code is technically allowed by the compiler.
Right.
But the problem is, if I click run, it's going to do exactly what Derek's saying. It's going to throw an error. I could not locate the file at, and it's going to have a very specific path here. C users bill, that's me, documents, Quorum Studio, my data frame project /data/ the name of that file. It could not find that file there. And if we look at our file, I'm going to open up my file browser here. So I've gone to my documents. I'm going to go to Quorum Studio. If you're on Mac, this will live in a different location, but on Windows by default, it'll be in your documents folder, documents, Quorum Studio, and then my data frame project. I do not have any folder in here named data. I don't have this file that we're looking for. And this is something that we're going to have to fix for any of the stuff that we're doing with our own projects, because by default, the projects don't have all possible data in them. They don't have the default things we have off of the website even. So we need to go get it. I could just go get the file and just dump it in this folder. As a matter of fact, I think that's what I'm going to do. But first, let's go actually download this file. So does anyone know how I can download this file?
Well, I downloaded it, but I don't know where I downloaded it from.
So, like I was saying before, and this is not intuitive. We're going to get a little bit into computer magic here. I was saying before that data is the name of a folder that lives somewhere on the computer where the website lives, right? Well, this particular file is public. So if I want to, I can actually go to this address on the website. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to quorumlanguage.com/data/height of male and female by country 2022.csv. And if I go to that URL, it will immediately download it into my downloads folder.
Okay.
So does everyone understand what I just did? Are there any questions about that? I know that a little bit of just like black magic just occurred and now I have a file here somehow.
Yeah, could you do that one more time?
Absolutely. So
And could you put the raw link in Slack? Just so people
that is a great point. Yes, I can do that. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put that in Slack in the EPIQ channel. But what I did was I took the path to the file that was in our example. So this data/height of male and female by country 2022.csv. All I did was I took the stuff that's in between the quotation marks. I selected that and I copied it. And then I pasted it onto the end of the website. So quorumlanguage.com/data/height of male and female by country 2022.csv. And you can pull anything that you find on the website, anything where we're using some sample data set. You can get any of our data sets just by going to the website / and then the name of wherever that file was. You just append it to the end of the website and it'll download it for you.
Is that just the main website, or can you be anywhere on the?
You want it to be specifically Quorum language, just the main part of the website, and then you paste the main part of the website / and then paste on to the end of it.
Okay.
Whatever you want for the file. And can anyone confirm for me that they were able to get the CSV as well from the link that I posted in the EPIQ channel?
It worked for me.
Okay. So at this point, I've gone ahead and I've downloaded this file. I'm going to move this file into my data frame project now. Okay, my data frame project that lives on my computer, I've added this file to, and now I'm going to ask you guys a trick question. If I run this now, does it work? I see Derek saying something, but he's muted.
you skip some steps there. You're assuming that we have a folder that says Quorum Studio on it, and I don't have that folder.
Okay,
Like-
so are you on Windows?
No,
Okay, Andy, do you remember where the Quorum Studio projects live by default on Mac? Because I do not recall off the top of my head.
Let me see here.
I do all my stuff on Windows and Stefik does a lot of his on Mac, so we've got our two different wheelhouses here.
right.
It's under, it's your home folder, and then it should by default, it goes into one called Quorum Studio. So I don't know what whatever your username is, you know what your home folder is?
No.
Okay, if I have, there's another way to find it. If you right click on the project and you click properties, it'll pull you up the path for where it lives. So it says like project location.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I can't. Okay, it's me. Y'all go ahead. Okay.
It's all good. We're trying to make sure everyone's on the same page, so.
Yeah, it's okay, Derek. Then that you can go to the go to finder thing, and then you go to that spot if it helps.
Yeah, I think it's because I'm on my university. It's hidden.
Oh,
Y'all go ahead.
Yeah, by the way, if anyone ever feels like at some point, like I've skipped a step or something wasn't clear, absolutely, please let me know, because I do want to make sure that everyone's on the same page here. As well too, if you end up getting stuck, Derek, and if you need help, we can always get someone into a breakout room just to help you find it real quick.
I might to do that.
Yeah, I get you. Do we have, I can't see the user list as easily when I'm in sharing screen. Do we have someone who can pop into a breakout room with them real quick here?
let's see,
Yeah,
Tim.
I'm free to help out.
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
Where am I going?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out.
Room 2?
Sure. How about 2?
All right, so is everyone else at this point? We have a project, we've grabbed the file, we've put it into the folder where our project lives on our computer. Are we all up to the same point here?
Yep.
All right, I hear a yep, I see a thumbs up. So I was just asking a trick question. I've put in this CSV into my project. I have changed nothing about my code. If I click run, will it work now?
Yes.
Let's try it. If I click
Mine
this,
did.
mine crashes. And it's for a really dumb and pedantic
Oh.
reason. But
Okay.
the computer cares about the dumb and pedantic stuff, which is why I'm bringing it up. Why does this crash, even though I've just put it into that folder?
Because that folder doesn't exist over here on your projects window.
So on my machine, I've dumped the CSV right into the main folder where all of my project lives, right? But in my code, I'm still getting it from this subfolder called data. I don't have a folder called data. If I get rid of this, it'll work now. And now it outputs all of the names of the header and then all of these values. The reason I bring that up is not just because, haha, I fooled you. It's because if you end up running into stuff where this folder doesn't exist, stuff like that happens all the time. It's really easy to do. So make sure that when you're bringing stuff in, you want to make sure that the file that you're loading is the exact right name, and you want to make sure that the folder matches up exactly. And depending on your operating system, if you're on Mac, Mac cares about the capitalization in this stuff, so you have to make sure all the capitalization is exactly the same as well. On Windows, the capitalization, it'll fudge it. It doesn't care about the capitalization, but it is still very sensitive to making sure that all of the folder is exactly right, and it still has to be spelled exactly correctly. You do still need to have the dot and the file extension at the end. All of that stuff does matter. It will break if you don't have it. Any questions about any of this stuff before we move on?
Where did, okay.
Mhm.
So the folder ended up where?
The
The file ended up where?
Oh, when you downloaded it?
Yes, so
Uh,
you downloaded it and then you made sure it was,
Yeah, so I downloaded it. It ended up in my downloads folder. And I'm on Windows, so are you on Windows as well?
yes.
Okay, so yeah, I downloaded it, ended up in my downloads folder. And then what I did was I went to where my project lives on my computer. So if you use the default path where it will create projects on Windows, that'll be your documents folder and then Quorum Studio.
Okay,
So my documents, Quorum Studio, and then inside of there should be a folder that is the name of your project. And that's the folder where you want to drop it into. That folder should contain a folder that says
Oh.
source code, project. And if you built it before, it'll also have build and run.
okay. I was looking like on Quorum Studio, like in, okay. You mean in the file path?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
So besides people generally of being affirmative that they are following, have other people been able to run it on their machines and it works for them?
Yeah, I was able to pull up a fake data set that I made the other day and it exported it to text just like I expected. Once I got it in the folder.
Yeah, that's
and
going to
referenced
be,
it.
sorry.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I expect that that's probably going to be one of the things that people are going to just encounter problems with the most in terms of errors or whatnot, is just making sure that you have data in the right place when we're doing stuff. Just because it's so easy to mess this up. So I'm spending, this might seem like an excessive amount of time just to talk about putting folders in right places and whatnot, but
All right, we found it.
okay, cool.
That was a
So-
really good refresher, William. Thank you.
Of course. And for Derek, were you able to get it in the right place, and were you able to run it and output your contents?
Yep.
Okay, great. Leslie, are you all good as well?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
I think.
I'm happy to take a little bit extra time just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because this is one of those things where it's like math. It's foundational knowledge. It all builds on top of each other. So it's definitely worth taking an extra minute just to make sure we're all on the same page.
But if we can't find the data, if we can't pull the data, then the rest of this doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. Doing
know?
data science on, I don't know, I don't have anything. Just
Right.
I'm using my imagination. Imagination's great and all, but it's not what we're running code on.
Yeah, maybe I should jump into a breakout room. I
Okay.
thought I had the file and I'm not having the file.
Sure. Tim, are you available again to hop back into a breakout room?
I think he's still over there. He was helping someone else.
Gotcha.
Tiffany, I believe, was her name.
Yeah, he's in room 2 right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me take a moment, see if I can figure out how to see the participants without dropping my screen sharing. Here we go.
Hey, William, this is Gina.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. Can you zoom in a little bit?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I absolutely can. I
was
forget
trying to
that
do it
every
with
time.
magnifier and I couldn't. There we go. Thank you.
Or is that a little bit better, or do you want me to go more?
Oh, that's good. I can use magnifier on top of it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry about that.
All right.
Okay, so I don't know if we resolved that question of the breakout room. I don't know if
It looks like Leslie's over there in room 2 now.
okay, cool. All right. So let's go ahead and let's move on. At this point, we've gone ahead and we've gotten our very basic data frame going. And from here, let's talk about the actual file itself. Specifically, we're going to talk about the tidy format. If we look at the contents of our file, so I'm going back to Quorum Studio, I'm just looking what it's outputted. It has this first row: rank, country name, male height in centimeters, female height in centimeters, male height in feet, female height in feet. And then all of the rows underneath it are values. So this first value, I'm not going to read all of the rows, but the first one is 1.0, Netherlands, 183.78, 170.36, 6.03, 5.59. This is what's called the tidy format. So quick question, is this the correct format?
For what?
Yeah, exactly. Is it the correct format? The answer is to ask the question, yeah, for what? It is the correct format for using our stuff because we are following a convention that is commonly, but not always, used. And that is really important because not everyone is using this format, or they might have data that they did collect in this format, but they had intended to use it in a different way than we did. That means that eventually we're going to get to a point where we might need to readjust some of our data to sort of fit it into the right shape in order to use it for our stuff. But what does it actually mean to have tidy data? Well, basically, there's 3 properties it has to fulfill. The first one is that variables must be in columns. So what does that mean? Variables must be in columns.
It's like the categories or the of data that you have essentially.
Yeah. For this, it's tempting to look at variables and immediately think of variables in the programming language, but it doesn't mean exactly the same thing. When we're using variables in the programming language, it's not saying that you must have a variable in the language for each of the variables in the data set. What the variables mean is this is the individual categories of stuff we're recording, basically. If we look at it in the context of what we have in our output, the variables are stuff like rank, country name, the male height or female height in different measurements. The variables are not individual data points, but rather the things that we're measuring in these particular things. So the individual rows underneath have all of the first column is always the rank, because that's what we have described in our header. The second column in all of these rows is the name of a country. It's a completely different type of value from what's stored in that other column in the rank, right? And then what we're seeing there is the second property of tidy data is that the observations are in the rows. This is not always something that you'd see because you could totally make a data set that does it the other way, where each of the rows is a variable and each of the columns represents a set of observations. And I have seen and have even used that sort of stuff before. But for tidy data, which includes the expectations of what the Quorum data frame is going to be using, the Quorum data frame expects that all of the rows contain a row of observations. Or in other words, this one row here, 1.0 Netherlands, 183, 170, blah, 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 blah. This is all one entry into our data set, basically, that says, we're looking at the Netherlands, here's the stuff relevant to the Netherlands. And all of the Netherlands stuff is in this one row. There isn't another row that also has Netherlands stuff. It's just this one row that is unique, that has this one set of observational data. And then finally, individual cells must represent only one value. That might seem kind of weird, like why would you have to say that? But there are absolutely cases where you might have a single cell in some set of data that you might collect that has more than one piece of observational data in it. And if you have that, you can't really use the data frame to perform any sort of statistics on it, because it's not going to be able to tell what the different pieces of the data are or what they're supposed to mean. For an example, and this is a little bit of a stretch, but work with me here. I have, for the male height in centimeters of the Netherlands, 183.78. It's a decimal, right? So it has the integer component, it has the fractional component. If this was put in by someone who was really determined that they actually wanted it to mean 2 different values, 183 represents some height value and 78 represents some weight value, and they think it's a really good idea to stick that together in the same cell and put a dot in the middle, that's not in the tidy format, for one. And the data frame can't possibly know that you're trying to do that. So it's not going to be able to magically deduce that out. So what that means is that if we get data sets that were made by people that weren't expecting to use their stuff in the same way that we are, at some point we might need to go and transform the data, fix it up, clean up their stuff to match the format that we need for our stuff. Any questions? Yes.
And we would do that in the spreadsheet external to Quorum, correct?
So depending on what it is, A lot of times, no, actually. A lot of times you would end up using code in Quorum to take the raw data that you have here and then say, okay, this data currently doesn't work in some form for what I'm trying to do, but you can basically say, make a copy of one data frame, put it into another, but change some stuff around so that it's like this stuff that was once a row, now it becomes a column, like rotate it around, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That being said, if you have something like this really particular example of 183.78, someone did something crazy with that, sometimes you might be in a case where if you have something really specific that you need to do, external tools are obviously still available to us, but whether or not the best tool will depend on what we actually need to transform in the data.
Can you transform it within within Quorum to be able to just say select the first 3 columns? So the 1.0, the Netherlands, and then the 83.7.
Yes, you totally can. And we're going to get to that, although we're not going to get to it quite yet.
Okay, cool.
We're looking a little bit ahead here as to we're looking at what our problems are to see what our solutions in the future will be. But yes, you absolutely can do just that.
Okay.
Now, that said, at this point, we have discussed broadly what it looks like to have the data frames. We talked a little bit about the CSV files that we have up on the server, how we pull them into our own local stuff, how we can make a data frame and then put it into this sort of tidy format, or at least understand the need that we have to put it into this tidy format. And we've seen what it looks like to try and take all the stuff that we had online and put it into our offline environment. Are there any questions about what we've done so far? Anyone has any questions about where we're headed? Any technical problems that anyone's run into? Are we all on the same page? Okay, so at this point, we are about 15 minutes ahead of the end of this particular session, but I basically hit what I wanted to hit in terms of the basics of the data frames and the tidy data, and I'd like to spend that extra time on the next session because we're going to be getting into an overview of the different charts that are available in our stuff. Before we do that, though, why don't we go ahead? We can take 5 minutes break here to get up, stretch our legs, use the bathroom, grab drinks, whatever you got to do, and then we will come back in just a couple minutes, and we will we'll call it a nice round number, 9:50. We'll come back, and then we will start hitting the broad overview of the charts that are available to start visualizing our data, doing more data frames rather than just outputting them to the console. Sound good?
Sounds good. Hey, William,
All right.
Before we go to the next session, can you
Yes.
stop the recording and then restart it for the next one? So that
Sure.
that way, we'll learn from